Hello, everyone. This is Kristen from Love Notary, and today I'm joined by Aleisha. There she is.
Here I am.
Host of Bridechilla podcast. But first, I just want to tell you a little bit about me in case those who don't know me. I started Love Notary last year, and the reason was because I wanted to help couples put focus on their love story during the wedding planning process, and then also to help bride and grooms out with the perfect wedding day gift when you do that wedding day gift exchange. So, but joining me and the guest of honor is giving you the lowdown on a stress-free wedding planning experience is Aleisha McCormack of Bridechilla Wedding Planning Podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting. This is my first YouTube Live. I've done the Periscope, I've done the Facebook Live, but this is my first YouTube. So, thank you. I feel...
Well, to be honest with you, it's mine too. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm glad that you're my first guest. So you have been hosting what was Save the Date, right? And now is Bridechilla for the past almost 2 years. And before that, you have a really interesting professional career that's a comedian, and it's helped. So I guess my first question to you, Aleisha, would be, how come wedding planning? How did you get involved in helping brides and literally becoming their go-to resource to help them through this wedding planning process? How did that come together for you?
Well, it wasn't on purpose. So that's the first thing. But then I did years ago, I wrote a book. So basically, I'm working on a television show, and we were, well, it was a morning TV show, a little bit like The View, or Loose Women, if you're watching in the UK. And it was a show called The Circle, and I was a reporter for that show. And they said, when we got engaged to my fiance Rich, they said, do you want to go out and do some wedding planning stories? And I'm like, yes. And we were really creating like a budget wedding, like it was on the cheap. And so we went out and did some sort of field stories where I would go and try and find some fun things to do, and it started from there. And then my agent at the time, that sounds really bad, but my agent had a publisher contact, and the publisher said, would you like to write a book about your wedding planning process? And I did, which was something that I did write a book. That sounds like I just whipped it up, but it took me ages. And then it sort of went from there. And then, so you might hear my accent. I'm from Australia, and I now live in London. And we basically moved to London 3 years ago on a bit of a whim. We wanted to have a bit of an adventure. We thought we'd better do it now before we pop out any babies or get into debt. So we packed a couple of suitcases and moved to London. And when we got here, I didn't really know what to do performing-wise. I work in television in the daytime. It's my real job. That's what I say. I shouldn't put the podcast down. It's a real job. But I was like, you know what? I like listening to podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but there wasn't really at the time anyone doing a podcast that is about wedding planning, especially in the way I choose to present wedding planning, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I thought this might be an opportunity for me to get a little bit of performing, a bit of, the Aleisha show, which sounds a bit awful, and then also talk about wedding planning, because I think there's so much BS in the industry and so many misguided bits of information that gets out there. I thought it'd be fun. So I started it not really thinking that it would be what it's now. Like it sort of evolved hugely. But it was literally me sitting at home in the bedroom with this little microphone, hello, and talking to myself. Thinking that no one would listen. Like I really didn't think. I would literally look at all the analytics and go, I've had 2 listens today.
Woo! I know, at the very beginning that you need, like, those little slightest wins can feel so big, can't they?
So I mean, it wasn't necessarily a natural evolution, but I feel like podcasting is really, it's like a big amalgamation of all my skills, because I'm a big mouth and I like the, social media, and I like to communicate, and I like to give my opinion. So I feel like this is just a natural fit for me.
Okay. So it all sounds great, but and then so you decided to write this book, and what I want to know, it's called Smart Wedding. It is available on Amazon for download, right?
Sure is.
Awesome. So what was the approach to the book when you got started writing it? It's obviously called Smart Wedding for a reason. So why did you call it Smart Wedding, and what are some of the tips in the book that you offer to brides-to-be?
Well, it's really funny actually now, and I think I was thinking about this today. If I were to write, and I'm actually writing a new sort of version, which will be the Bridechilla guide, and it's really interesting about how my perception of weddings and wedding planning and all this stuff that's come together has evolved since I wrote that book. And I think there are, I'm very proud of that book, but I think there's lots more to say about, all the stuff surrounding weddings. And, every time I do a podcast and I get a listener question or I interview someone that gives me new information and new perspective, it really changes my viewpoint. I think that's the best thing about what we do in storytelling and getting to know people, is that you can your perspective can evolve. So I think Smart Wedding for me was just about the idea that as a bride I felt quite a lot of pressure, and this was 4 years ago. I think the industry has really ramped up since then, because we all carry around the phones and we all look at things on Pinterest and Instagram, and I think we have built up such a level of expectations with what we feel like we should do all the time. So really it was my way of stripping it back and saying, look, here's what I did, and it doesn't mean it's right. We've all got opinions about how things are done, but my experiences of saying what are the things that I valued and we valued when we were planning, and how to cut out all the rubbish that is sort of white noise in a way, for us anyway. I'm always very aware of saying what I value is very different to what I'm sure you value and what everyone out there values. But it was more about just saying that there's a lot of stuff that we're sold, and it really feels like, you go on social media, and we've been talking about hashtags and finding brides and grooms to talk to. But sometimes I go on Twitter and Instagram as well, and it feels like everyone is yelling at you, like it's just like, buy my thing, or you should do this. And I just wanted it to be the opposite. And my whole ethos with the podcast is to go, just do whatever the hell you want to do. Like that is the best piece of advice that I think a lot of people don't listen to very often.
I can really relate to that, because, the reason I started my company was because the wedding, in my opinion, over the last several years has become anything but, or all the circus surrounding the wedding has become anything but your love story. And I just wanted to help people find center in, like you just said, what is uniquely you throughout the wedding planning process. That's what you should do. It should tell some sort of story about who you are as a couple. So I couldn't agree more with you. Now, somewhere along the way in your podcasting experience and evolution of it, you developed the term Bridechilla. And so for all of the folks watching at home who may not be familiar with you, I would love to hear about how you created the term Bridechilla, Groomchilla, maid of honor chilla, and what does that mean? I mean, how can a bride become a Bridechilla?
Well, good question. I will say that Bridechilla, that word has been bandied around for the last 15 years or so, and it's just something I picked up on and really ran with. So I never say I invented it or anything, because I feel like it's something that it's a term that's sort of been around, but I've made it my thing, and it's really become, what represents the advice that I give, and really selling to people. I mean, we've all seen the Bridezilla's show where it's just manic, crazy women. And I really hate this idea that people are, have said, if you get engaged, then people go, you're going to be a Bridezilla? And it's like, oh my gosh, everyone relax. It's completely unnecessary. And I really think, although that show is very entertaining, it's also an abomination for feminism, and also for how we are, perceive ourselves as women and men as well, but in the, getting hitched and having this sort of pressure on us to behave a certain way because you want it to be perfect. So Bridechilla for me is really about creating a wedding day that reflects who you are as a couple, and then you bounce off that idea to then focus on what's important to you and what you value, not necessarily being pressured to spend a lot of money and behave a certain way. And I really see Bridechilla, like the podcast itself, people listen to it and get wedding planning advice, but also there's a lot of like life advice in there as well. And for me, it's just about saying point in your life, you're starting this like new team with your partner, and you are joining families together, and it's a really good way just to set your boundaries and start off on a really good foot. And that's by communicating and being honest and open, and really taking the opportunity to set these sort of I don't want to say boundaries, but set these sort of limitations and create the way that you can communicate with these new people in your life and your partner, to make sure that you get what you want without being an a-hole. Bridechillas aren't jerks.
That's a really good point. And I know there are going to be a lot of newly engaged brides and maybe some grooms on here watching for some advice about how to create that stress-free wedding planning experience. So what would be a couple pieces of advice based on things that you've heard over your years of talking and thinking and coaching on wedding planning that they can do to really make sure that there's logistics concern in planning a wedding, obviously, and that creates pressure and deadlines and all that can create stress naturally. But how can they keep a Bridechilla sort of attitude about things? What are some of your top tips?
Well, I think like the fundamentals is like before you book anything or plan anything, it's actually to sit down and have a conversation with your partner about what you both want. And you'd be surprised as to how many people do not do that, because again, I really bang on the podcast about this idea that I think as women, a lot of the times are sort of programmed by media and Disney movies and all this stuff that we should have a dream wedding and it should be perfect, and we should come to our engagement with a complete book of ideas that we want to have. And what's great about my listeners, I know we've talked about this before because I think our people are the same people, is that a lot of brides that write to me and Bridechillas write to me going, I have not a clue. This is not something I've dreamed about forever. I've been doing other things. And that's what I was like, because I was like, I never, if I close my eyes and I think about the wedding dress I wanted, I was like, I don't know, something that looks good, something that doesn't, show my tummy or what. I just want to feel sexy.
Not too heavy. I'm going to be dancing all night. I don't want to exactly.
But I didn't go, I dreamed this ball gown, and it just wasn't me. And it doesn't mean it's no criticism to someone that had the dreams. So I think, but so many people don't have the dreams and then feel pressured because they write to me and they leave me voice messages going, I don't have that dream. Is that wrong? And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, it's right. This means that you can evolve and plan something together that you want. And I think also just starting from the point of view to go, it's just a day. It's a great day. It's a killer party, but there is hopefully 50, 60, 70, 80 years of your life still, hopefully more than 50, that you've got to live. So don't take it too seriously. Relax. It's fine. It's just a big party. And just having that conversation with your partner and going, what are the three things that if you close your eyes and you really want to have it there, what are they? Because you'd be surprised a lot of the time that people go, I really want a piñata, or I definitely want a dessert bar. I don't know, crazy things. Or I just want to be with you alone with not a crowd. I don't know. There's so many, you've got to have the conversation.
I agree. On the communication point, there's a couple tips that I think really helped me as I was going through my wedding planning experience. So the first one was we got engaged in December, and of course, everybody's first question is, what is the wedding? When's the wedding? What is the date? Right? And have you thought about it, and what colors, and who are going to be your bridesmaids, and all this stuff in the first month. And it's just people are expressing their excitement for you, so they're doing nothing wrong, but at the same time it almost makes you feel a little suffocated. And so what I like to tell people when they first get engaged is to say, I'm taking this amount of time to celebrate my engagement. And right now I'm not planning anything related to my wedding. I'm just enjoying on being engaged to my new fiance.
Yes.
And so when I put those boundaries in place, and even maybe I said, let's talk about this in about a month, it helped to ease some of that pressure that I was feeling like, oh my gosh, I've got so many decisions to make. I've really got to, buy all the bridal magazines up and go to all the, publications online right now. So that was one. The second thing I would do in the middle of the whole affair, wedding planning experience, was when somebody asked me a question that I wasn't sure about, or I wasn't really into or whatever, but I didn't want to be off-putting about it, I'd always say, you know what, that's a good idea, that could work, but let me check with Greg, and who's my husband now. And a rule that we had was we would always make decisions about everything together. So it was always a tag team effort. It was never about being, it was never me making a decision on behalf of us. It was us making a decision on behalf of us. And so when you tag team it with your partner, I feel like it becomes a little bit easier because you have somebody there supporting you along the way.
Yeah. And it's a two-person situation. And I think when we go back to Bridechillas and all that sort of stuff, it's when one person gets so carried away, and of course it's a TV production, so it's full of rubbish. Trust me, I work in TV. But it's this idea that people put so much pressure on themselves to be like solo brides that they feel they are overwhelmed. And it goes back to this idea that you were just saying, that they've got to make all the decisions now and everything has to be a certain way or the highway. And I feel like that actually, makes you not enjoy the process. You're putting a lot of cash into it, whether it's yours or your parents or some great aunt who's been very generous. And I feel like there's so much expectation placed upon yourself, let alone all the other people going, what's going on? When's this all happening? It can be really daunting. So I think, it's good to take that time. It's really good advice of you to say, just relax, everyone. You'll know when you know. Now back off. Go away.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a couple questions that come up, and I think newly engaged folks probably encounter this quite a bit. They think, do I need to get a wedding planner to stay calm about all of this? That's one. Yep. What about eloping? Is that going to help me feel more calm? So what do you think about those, two particular ideas?
Two great ideas that I talk about a lot.
Yeah.
So from my personal perspective, we did not have a wedding planner, and I deeply regret that, because I thought I was superwoman. We thought we were super people, which we are. But also, we would have loved an extra couple of hours sleep, I tell you, on the morning of the wedding. And also in the days after the wedding, we ended up having to return all this stuff. And I do talk about that in the book, that we went super tight ass, as we'd say in Australia. We were being cheap to the point of going, we were really trying to stretch all of our money as far as we could go. And I'm still an advocate of not getting into debt and having any financial hangovers from a wedding, because that's ridiculous in my point of view. So I don't regret that we didn't spend the extra money, but I sort of regret not thinking that that was a possibility. And I also think that wedding coordinators, day of coordinators, and wedding planners, the three sort of tiers of helpers, are a lot more prevalent now. And there are so many talented people that you can get on board. And it doesn't mean, two things that always come up in conversations on my show are people saying, well, I don't want to let go of all the details. I don't think that's at all a possibility. I think, a wedding coordinator is someone that is a really good organizer. And you could say to a wedding planner, go and book everything. Here's what I want. And they could do it. You will pay for that. There is no doubt about it. But you can also say, here's a list of all the vendors I've contacted. Can you correspond with them and make sure everything's organized? They would create structure and do a plan for the day, because I think people underestimate how much information, timeline, coordination goes into getting an event off the ground, because it's not normal for us to be, in my life, I'd never organized anything more than 6 people around for dinner on a Saturday night. So when you're asking to book a caterer, find a venue, make sure a photographer turns up on time, if the cake's coming, blah, blah, blah. And this is, I'm not saying it's any different if you spend $2,000 or $200,000. I think it's still a matter of keeping the show on the road and making sure it all works. And the big thing for me is to say, on your wedding day, if you've put all this effort in, whether you are having 4 people at your wedding or 500 people, you don't want to be thinking about crappy details or problem solving. So to me, having a coordinator or a day of coordinator coming to help you, there are so many great people that you can basically come with a bit of paper and an itinerary in the weeks before your wedding and say, here's what I'd like to happen. Can I have your advice on if this is all going to work? And they show up on the day and they just make sure it all runs. And I think at minimum, that's what I would advise people. It doesn't cost a lot of money. You can do great deals. And also, if your venue comes with someone, use them because they know the industry, they know people, they can use connections. I think they're invaluable. So that's my first response. What do you think?
No, I think the same. I think I didn't have a coordinator, I didn't hire somebody separately to be my wedding planner, but my venue did have a coordinator, and she was extremely helpful on the day of. She was the point person where I could, ask all my questions related to organizing. What time is the dinner going to come out, for example? She was able to answer that. And when I was going and checking out the different venues and making my decision, obviously the aesthetic and the feel and the look of the venue was priority. But secondary was the coordinator, and I met her and I knew that she just had what it took to pull all these different pieces together. So I felt extremely comfortable moving forward with that venue, and it proved to pay off at the end. So I think, and I also think that there's probably, like the day of coordinator, there's something at every budget level, I think, to maybe help you manage all those vendors like you were talking about. So I do think that having somebody as an arms and a leg is going to help you out more than maybe you can manage yourself. And I think a lot of people think that their bridesmaids, their groomsmen, and their parents are going to be that support for them. Yeah. And maybe we can talk really quickly about that, because I think that those people are there to provide friendship on your day and surrounding your day, and they're there to be encouraging and to be excited for you. But relying on them to help you organize your wedding is probably is going to create more stress for you if you have that expectation.
Yeah, and I think that it's absolutely fine to ask for help and get your friends and family to jump in and help out, especially if they have skills, but also be very careful if someone is, I always think, if someone's a graphic designer or something, and then you're sort of relying on someone to do work for you without asking in the right way is a bit sort of cheeky. But I do think that they want to enjoy the day as much as you do. So yes, I think allocating small tasks to family and friends to make sure things get done on the day is fine, but also handing Auntie Jill your complete wedding itinerary and making sure she keeps everything going, if that's not her bag and she's going to freak out, is probably not the best course of action. It's not going to cost you a lot of money, and I think the peace of mind to have that person built into your budget from day one is a gift. I couldn't recommend them more. And to be honest, I really think that they are good with finding, if you've got someone early, and a day of coordinator doesn't mean that you have to you can book them 6 months in advance and have chats with them and make sure that you are communicating with them regularly. But they're really good to bounce off about feedback about vendors as well. So I think use those relationships to your advantage by saying, what do you think of Barry, the photographer? And they're like, oh, I've worked with him, he's an idiot. And so you can Barry off the list. So I think if you are strategic, and this is part of what I say about being a Bridechilla, is thinking a little laterally. And the best feedback I've been getting recently is that people ask about makeup artists, and I love talking about makeup artists. And some of the most honest people talking about makeup artists are photographers, because they will go, oh, that looks shit. She could not do makeup for wedding photography and wedding makeup, it's a skill, because you don't want to look like a painted doll, but you also don't want to have nothing on, because then, you look washed out and whatever. So it's a delicate balance, but photographers are the most honest people. As soon as you say, who's the wedding, they'll go, forget it, or they're amazing. And I think, that's valuable information. Put it in your pocket, book them.
Yeah, so I think that's key, and we're sort of wrapping up on our 30-minutes here, but I wanted to ask one final question, and this comes in the realm of organization. So let's say you can't hire a wedding planner, you don't want to, you really want to orchestrate all of this yourself. So for somebody who's just starting out on their wedding planning journey, and they've got the whole gamut of activities to plan, what advice could you give them to get started from an organizational perspective? Should they get a wedding planning binder? Should they buy magazines? How do they kind of make some, I don't want to say madness, streamline the madness, streamline the chaos?
Well, it's funny, because I think it depends on who you are as a person. Now, I look around here and I've got lists. I like lists, but I also... the lists don't always work for me on paper. I like to pick up a pen and write things down, and then there's piles of them everywhere. So that's not necessarily the best system. It's just something I'm a habitual list maker. I don't know if I always cross them off. But I think there are so many great free programs and free resources. Our lovely friend Christina has Plan the Day. She's got an app, she's got a whole website that you can register and put all the information in one place. The two things I would say is, whatever your system is, whether you choose to pay for something like Plan the Day, or you choose to, I use Trello, which is TRELLO, and it's like a pin board where you can add cards and notes, and that's how I organize all of my podcast information. So I put all my Q&A questions, and I can attach Dropbox links and all this sort of stuff to it. It's such a simple system, but also I can share my boards, like a Pinterest board, with you, or I could share it with my husband. So I think whatever you do is to find a system that works for you, and make sure that you update the system and you keep it working. And also that you have one place where all the information is stored, and you can tick things off as you go, because there's nothing better than seeing a tick next to a list, or you can cross things off. The last thing I'd also say is, get a separate email address, for the love of God.
Oh, yes. Huge advice there. So easy, but life-changing.
It will, because you don't, I know, you've got all this, and I think I'm a big fan of saying, subscribe to all the stuff, but don't do it through your normal email address, because you'll go insane. But send them to another email address. It's great for getting discounts and all this stuff. And our mailing lists, it's much easier to put everything in one place, and also have vendors respond to that email address, so you can just go and focus on wedding planning, and then you can go back to your real life and do other stuff on your other email address.
Yeah, I agree. There's nothing more confusing than being in your inbox that you use personally for everything, and then having to see all the wedding planning come in mixed in with all the other stuff. It's easier just to organize it as a project, put it in its own email address, and carve out a few hours a night or a few hours on the weekend, open that thing and go to town.
Yep. And then when it's all done, you just delete the email address, and you never have to have 50 different bloody emails from the knot. I still occasionally get emails from the knot. I'm like, I got married 4 years ago. I'm done.
It's true. They like you to hang around for a while until you unsubscribe, right?
Exactly. And I think it's just much easier to keep things, separate. Like you were saying, Pinterest, just relax about it. You don't need to have 40 million boards, because you will have a mental breakdown. And I also think it's good to just switch off the devices occasionally. Go and live life. Go outside. It's nice out there.
Totally. Yeah, one of my pieces of advice that I like to say is, if you're getting stressed from wedding planning, just go on a date night with your your fiance, and don't talk about wedding planning, or call up a best friend and don't talk about wedding planning. Yeah. I think the best refresh from wedding planning stress is to get outside of it. And I think you're going along that journey for so long, it's so top of mind that you really do default into those conversations, but make it an active choice to talk about anything but wedding planning.
And remember, best quote that a friend said to me is, nobody cares about your wedding as much as you do. We don't really care that much. And they're not being mean. It's just like, I don't want to talk about napkins. I don't want to talk about crappy chair covers. They don't care. Tell someone that cares. Tell us. But don't tell your friends 24/7, especially your single friends who eventually will go, I can't speak with you anymore. I've got to go. You're annoying.
Yeah, they might not ever call you back again. So don't let that happen.
Be nice to bridesmaids. For the love of God, be nice to bridesmaids.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Well, this has been really fun, Aleisha. We've run out of time very quickly here, so I feel like we're going to have to do this again on maybe a separate topic. But before we sign off, I want to tell all the viewers to definitely subscribe to your podcast. You can go ahead and give them the details so they can whip out their iPhone and do it right now.
Oh, whip it out. You just search for the Bridechilla podcast or Bridechilla wherever you get your podcasts. If you're not a podcast listener, they're free. There's over 230, 40 episodes. I should know now. There's a lot of episodes. There's 100 hours of podcasts to listen to. And I encourage you to listen to other podcasts as well. There are other wedding podcasts out there. Shop around, but come back to me.
And you can find me at lovenotary.com. At the very bottom of my website, there's an email sign-up form there, and I provide weekly lessons in love. So my focus is less on the logistics and more on the relationship part of your wedding planning experience and beyond. So thank you so much for coming and hanging out with Aleisha and I for a little bit, and hopefully we'll do another one of these very soon. Woo-hoo. Bye, everyone.
Bye.